that day, just another day. I pray soon as I woke. Never thought I'd be the victim of a paralyzing stroke. On that day, just another day. I pray soon as I woke. Never thought I'd be the victim of a paralyzing stroke. Stroke could be you. It happened to me. Never thought it could happen to me. On that day, just another day. I pray soon as I woke. Never thought I'd be the victim of a paralyzing stroke. On that day, just another day. I pray soon as I woke. Never thought I'd be the victim of a paralyzing stroke.
What's up, boys and girls? How you guys doing today? We have another great episode of You're Too Young to Have a Stroke. I have my partner in crime, the beautiful, the luscious, the gorgeous, the sexy Christina Perez. How you doing, sis? Hey, see how I rolled the Perez? See how I did that? See how I did that?
Perez. Good evening, sir.
All right, all
right.
What's going on, sis?
It is Wednesday. It's evening. It's hump day. And
Hump day.
Here we are doing what we do. How are you?
I'm good. I missed you. I missed our talks. I missed our weekly talks. I really enjoy our time when we get on here and just chit chat about the daily topic. And today is no different, a little bit different. I guess in the spirit of Father's Day, we want to make sure that we have recognizing fathers and also their children and let their children have their voice being heard. So
absolutely.
Today, I think it's being no different. I got a surprise for everybody, Christina. This is something that I've been waiting for a long time. I have my daughter. Her name is Kyra. Kyra is going to be our guest today. So let me bring her on so we can actually
bring her on.
Kyra, how you doing, sweetheart?
Hi, I'm doing well.
All right. So, Christina, today I want to talk about Dad, you have changed. This is something that my daughter has said to me, after I had my stroke. And I really am curious for other people, not just myself, but other people that had a stroke at a very young age and they had young children and their children had to adapt. So I'm very curious about how my daughter had adapted. She just graduated high school. She turned 18. I'm happy to actually see that. But, my perspective is a certain type of way because I was thinking about myself, thinking about how I'm recovering, and I'm also trying to be a father. I'm never, well, not saying never, but I didn't really had an idea what was going on with her. So
while she was a child.
As she was a child growing up and having a father, one day was one way and then the next day was somewhere totally different. So this is going to be kind of nervous for me, because I don't know what she's going to say. I don't know if she's going to say, Dad, I wish you was that. I don't know. But, I really am curious because I would like her to say what she wants to say. And also I want other people in the audience to understand, as a stroke survivor, if you have children, there might be some things that you are doing that my daughter might be helping you out to make sure that you don't do that. So you could have a more closer or a better connection with your children.
Yeah, clear vision. Kyra, how old were you, honey, when your dad came home?
I'm pretty sure I was about 13. Yeah.
Nah, you was 11.
In age.
Yeah, age. I was
speaking mentality. Let him know.
My bad, ladies. My bad.
She was already a teenager. There was no preteen.
She was a grown woman. She and that's the thing about her too, is like dealing with my children or my it's sad to say because they was like my sanctuary. They was my rock. There was the reason why I consider myself to be alive today. When I had my stroke, you guys heard my story over and over again. But the first thing I said to God, I was like, I thought about my daughters and, I said, I can't leave this earth here. I need some more time on this earth. Mm-hmm. I got more things to teach them. So give me another chance. And it's clear as day, as we are talking right now, I got another chance. But a lot of things happen and I wasn't in the right mind state to actually control a lot of things that actually happened with me and my children. So I'm very curious about what they're going to say with this particular show and this program. So I don't know if you want to go first, Christina, or you want me to go first. It doesn't make a difference.
Well, although Kyra, I have lots of questions. I think it would be much more appropriate for you to go first and dig in. Let's see. I want to hear about Greg.
Hey, want me to speak?
So, Greg, you're gonna ask a
Oh,
question.
you want me to ask her? I think you said. I
I
think you
said,
said Kyra.
Kyra,
So
you and I are right here, right?
yeah,
We're
I'm somewhere
waiting,
totally different. I'm listening
and
to you
I'm
guys.
working on my
I'm looking
ankle.
at Kyra, waiting for her to talk.
We
All
thought
right,
you froze.
all seriousness, all seriousness. When you heard that I had a stroke, Kyra, what was you expecting me to be like after you heard that actual news?
Well, I wasn't expecting anything to change really. I was expecting you to come home, go back to work again, and everything would be back to normal. Because as a kid hearing the news, I was assuming it was bad, and I thought I had lost you, but I didn't. So I was like, what would change? But a lot changed.
Did you understand what a stroke was?
No, at the time, no, I didn't realize how serious it was.
And you say that like right now, because I know I had a very hard time articulating it to you, and I wasn't sure if you understood it. So a lot of times it might have came off that I was annoying or I was saying things to you, and it didn't make any sense because I was trying to articulate it to you. How did you find out what it meant and how severe it was that your father had a stroke and he was not going to be the same person that he was before?
Well, I really just had to experience it really, because at first I was like, "Oh, Dad's gonna be okay. It's all gonna go back to normal." But then things start going downhill. You divorce mom, and then you move out the house. You're no longer working. I'm like, things have changed entirely. You're not the same.
So yeah, you just said a mouthful with that. What you just said right there. World change. We got your parents got divorced, and I wasn't the same. I moved out. How did that? And I really don't want to go all into that, but you brought it up. How did that affect you?
Well, when you first had like your first job, you were always traveling. So I took it as that because you were never really home. So when you left, I was like, oh, it's just one of those times where he's traveling. He'll be back. He'll come visit occasionally, but he's not always going to be here in this exact spot with me. So I took it as that, which helped me cope with knowing that you weren't in the house anymore. But yeah, that's about it.
Before I let Christina talk and ask you some questions, I just want to remind everybody that's watching, you can follow us on Facebook and also on YouTube at You're Too Young to Have a Stroke. Please like, subscribe, and follow us and share all of our videos, all of our content, so we can bring out this information to more people across the world. So, Christina, do you have questions for my baby girl, Kyra?
Of course I do. That's why we're here, right?
Okay.
Hi, Kyra. I also want to say congratulations again to Kyra, who just graduated high school. I know your dad during your introduction, but definitely some woot woot for that, honey. You should be very
Thank you.
proud. We're very proud of you. So for me, kind of jumping on what you were saying to your dad, that a lot had happened in such a short amount of time. I mean, you already had to deal with him having a stroke. And you said, as far as him working, who was the dad that came home, opposed to the dad that you said you were kind of used to traveling a lot? Um, who came home?
I
Who
would
was that
say a
dad?
man that was more focused on his family than everything. Because before, I feel like he was more focused on work. That's why he was always traveling a lot. He wanted to provide for his family, and to do that, it was work. But when he came home, it was just like he was only focused on me and my siblings. I was like, oh, okay, he's slightly different. He still cares, but that's the person that came home.
Now, when you say focus, what do you mean?
As in, like, that's all he was focused on about. He was just trying to be there for us, because I don't know if he realized that he wasn't there beforehand, or if that's just what happened. He just changed that way. But that's all he was doing, is like wanting to be there for us. He wanted to be there for my 15th birthday. He wanted to be there for my sister's birthday. He wanted to be there at almost every important moment that we had.
Because he felt like he messed out. Okay. Greg,
Hmm.
what were your thoughts coming home?
Coming home?
Mm-hmm.
Like I said earlier, Christina, my whole focus was I need to teach my daughters things in this life because I almost was taken away, and there's a lot of things I didn't teach them. And every moment, every time they had some kind of accomplishment in life, I was just blessed and had so much gratitude for being around to actually see it.
Hmm.
It was more of I can't work anymore. So now it's time for me to do the things that I didn't do before because I was on, like my daughter was saying, I was on the road so much. So now I wanted to be a part of that. I wanted to be closer. I wanted to have that connection. So that those were my thoughts. My thoughts was, as Kyra said, my then wife and I got divorced, and these three people, the only three people I knew for a very long time. And as a stroke survivor, when you start to reset yourself, uh, you try to get back to familiar areas. And I didn't have access to their mother anymore. And the only two familiar areas that I had was them too. So I
Hmm.
was very focused and very headstrong and trying to be very involved in their lives.
Kyra, when your dad came home, I know you mentioned about a lot again, how he was a provider and things of that sort. The audience, I'm sure, also knows that that obviously changed. Um, what are some of the things besides the working and the traveling as a father, as your dad used to do, but he was no longer able to do because of the stroke?
Well, in all honesty, I feel like he was less able to take care of me because I feel like I was doing more taking care of him. I'm not quite sure exactly what I was doing, but I felt like the need to protect him more than I feel like he felt the need to protect me.
Protect him, clarify, protect him from what?
I was just worried about everything that was happening. I was unsure if, like, my father was as strong as he used to be, if he was as aware of his used to be. So each time we would go out, I was always be keeping an eye on him, always be walking around, keeping out, like had to keep an eye on him. So yeah.
Greg,
Yes, Christina.
how did you feel going out? Did you get that from Kyra? That she
Um,
was
yeah, kind of. But
over
before I answer
overseeing?
that question, guys,
Mhm.
if you guys are watching in and you want to ask us questions, you want to ask Kyra, Christina, or myself any questions, feel free to leave any comments inside of it. We'll bring them on live and we'll answer to you guys instantly. So please feel free to answer. Ask questions on Facebook or on YouTube. It was weird, Christina, because I had this concept that I'm a big guy and my girls are very small and tiny, petite, and I was there as their protector. It was a time that New England Patriots, go Patriots, came to Atlanta and had a Super Bowl. And they had this Super Bowl pre-party weekend that they had all these events going on, and Atlanta was packed. And I was nervous that if someone picked up my daughters, I wouldn't be able to pick them up and protect them. Because when before my stroke, these girls used to do some really crazy things. When we go in the store, they would hide underneath the clothes racks, and we couldn't find them. So now I'm thinking like they might run away from me, and I won't be able to find them. But what they did, it was like they understood, I guess the term, they understood the assignment. They stayed close to me and made sure that I was okay instead of me worrying about them. So it was heartwarming that they was doing that, but it was also like bittersweet because I realized that I was taking away their childhood.
Kyra, you feel like that? Do you feel that him recovering took away your childhood?
Yeah, because as a kid, I always hear stories about people taking care of like their grandparents and stuff like that because they're older and they're like in their 20s and taking care of their grandparents. But when I was a kid, going on 13, 14, I feel like I was a caregiver to my father, even though it's supposed to be the other way around. And wasn't able to, I wouldn't say have fun anymore, but I wasn't able to focus on the hobbies that I used to focus on because I was too concerned about my dad.
Greg, did you notice that being home?
Yeah, I absolutely noticed that. I just said that it was bittersweet. Didn't I say it was bittersweet?
Bittersweet doesn't
Kyra,
mean that
me
you
and you are
notice.
here. Kyra, you and I are
Bitter
here, but I don't think Christina's here with
bittersweet
us, Kyra.
doesn't mean she just said a lot.
I don't think she's
Bittersweet
here with
doesn't
us.
mean keeping that, but very well, Greg. Remember, we're both Aries. Don't do it to yourself. With that being said, I mean, it's perfect because obviously your dad is very vocal. So, my next question, being that your father is so open with his stroke recovery, with social media, public speaking, things of that sort, why do you think that he chooses to do that?
I feel like he wants to bring awareness to what's going on with him and other people who are like him. Because growing up as a kid, I never knew about a stroke at all until he started, he had one and he started advertising it. And now I'm hearing about all these other people having strokes. And I feel like ever since he said it, it's more people who are like coming into the light and like okay to talk about their stories and how they got it and things like that.
Do you think if it were you, would you be as open?
No, I wouldn't feel like people would care about my story at all, regardless of how sad it was.
Do you think your dad's story's sad?
Well, from my perspective, yes. I'm not sure how other people view it, but I feel it was sad because as a kid, I was at school during the time I actually heard the news that he got his stroke. We were on the way home from school, and our mom had picked us up, and she got a call from I don't know who, but she got a call. She pulled over the car, immediately stopped in the middle of the street, pulled over the car, and my sister starts crying because she's like worried. She's like, "Oh my gosh, what could have happened?" Because dad's not here, and the only thing she assumed was something's wrong. And I'm just in shock for
Or
a moment. I'm like, "Sis, stop crying, stop crying." And all of a sudden, I start crying with her, and our mom tells us to calm down, and we're like, "Okay, so it's not that bad. Dad's still alive. It's just something happened." So yeah, I do consider his story pretty sad.
Yeah, that's the first time I'm hearing that.
how does that make you feel?
It's rough, because I do remember that when I was calling 911 operator called them, and I'm like, oh crap, she's actually picking up my kids from school, so everybody's hearing this at the same exact time, and hearing her saying it now, you know, you like you said, like I said earlier, I didn't see the other side of it. I'm seeing the other side, the ripple effect, and it's tough. It's tough to hear. But Kyra, I do have a question for you. You said that you don't think people care. People do care. Once they see a young woman that have a stroke, they would care. But you know, I don't think you understand why I do this. I don't really do this for myself. AVM superhero, the caregiver baskets, the interviews. I don't do this for myself. All this is for you and your sister. I've created a name, I created a brand. So when I leave, you guys will have something to fall back on. So I do all this stuff, not necessarily just because I want my story to get out. I could care less about myself. The only thing I really care about, you can ask Christina, ask anybody else, is my left and right side of my heart. And that's you and your sister. And all these things I do. So when it's time for you to say, okay, Dad, I want to be part of it, it's there. There's an LLC that's already set up already for us. Whenever you're ready to go on and take over, it's yours. A Dixon, people do care, but it's hard for some to show emotion. That's true too. And I think what A Dixon is actually talking about, even with stroke survivors, there's a lot of stroke survivors out there that can't show facial expressions. They can't show those expressions. They don't have control of their motor skills to actually do that. So they think that nobody's paying attention to them or nobody
Paying
cares
attention.
about them, but they really do. Christina, let me throw this at you. As you're hearing this, does this make you think about anybody that you had in your life around that time that you had your stroke and what they was going through and how it affected them?
My father. And with Father's Day, I say that because at the time, um, when I had my stroke, I was single. So therefore, if you're single, in an emergency situation, it essentially is your next of kin. Um, and my next of kin is my father. And we had gotten some time not speaking. Um, so they they winded up doing the emergency surgery. However, I believe there were some, I don't know, decisions that had to be made that essentially he had to be present to do so. And at the time, with my previous relationship, whose his mom is the one who essentially called 911 and saved my life and things of that sort. Um, it took a lot for people to find my dad because who gives people their father's numbers? Right, Kyra? Like, you don't give your friends your dad's number. Nobody does that. Um, so with social media and Facebook, they were able to contact my father. That's what it made me think of. It made me think of what went through my father's head hearing that and whether or not um, he fully understood what had happened to me or if he even fully knew, about a stroke. Hearing Kyra saying, her and her sister started crying and things of that sort because they had no idea what was going on. Um, I would think that's rough. That's who I thought of. Thought of my dad.
Christina, you bring up a very interesting point. I don't know the people that's out there that didn't have a stroke or don't have any family members that did have a stroke and watching this and is curious. Christina brought up an interesting point. She said she was single and basically her next of kin was her father, and nobody knew how to get in touch with her. They had to go through Facebook and find her. So, you could be stuck in a hospital because you don't have your paperwork set up for any directives for your life. That is a very important thing that you should take care of right now. As soon as you get off this actual live, that you should be setting that up because you never know. Because Christina and I woke up the day that we had our stroke and we're like, we're gonna have an excellent day. We didn't realize that we was gonna have a stroke that day. We thought we had plenty more time to be vibrant, to do whatever we wanted to do. So that is a very important point that Christina brought up. So I thank you for that, Christina. Um,
Absolutely.
Kyra, let me ask you something. There was a time that you said something to me, um, and I don't know if you remember it or not, but it prompted me to do certain things with you that I saw within you that and I'll tell you this part first, but then I'll tell you the part that I'm talking about. Um, when you was a kid, you said something pretty interesting. You said, "Dad, I don't care what anybody says to you about you. I love you, and I'll always be there for you." Do you remember saying that to me? Okay. So there was a point in time that I wanted to talk to you so bad. I wanted to relay a lot of things to you, try to articulate things, tell you what I'm trying to do with this AVM superhero thing. And I knew you didn't understand it. So I said something to you. I said, Kyra, I wish you was older so I could actually tell these things to you. How did that make you feel when I said that?
Well, at the time I was still young. So even though, I understood that you wanted me to understand you, I was still a kid and I still wanted my childhood. And hearing you say that, I was like slightly heartbroken that I couldn't fully comprehend what you were trying to say to me. But I understood what you're saying. At the same time, I was still sad to hear it.
Okay. I have a follow up question, unless Christina do. But before we do that, we did a comment here. It says, "Hey Dixon, my family disappeared quietly. However, here I am. Took 3 years to stop being bitter." Yeah, sometimes you feel that getting that depression void, and that's a very good point that A Dixon is talking about. Um, that's where I was at. I had nobody. I literally had nobody. I was sick. I learned I had diabetes, and people that I wanted to talk to, I couldn't talk to no more. My ex-wife, we're going through a divorce. I can't talk to her anymore. But I lived with her for the last 20 years. I ain't know anybody else. So who's the next closest thing? My oldest daughter. She's 13, 14 years old. So how can I actually speak to her about who I am, what I'm going through, and not destroy who she is as a child? You know what I'm saying, Christina? Does that make sense to you?
It does. I also think that um, as a stroke survivor, as we're going through these things, we also need to have some sensitivity to what our family may be going through. Um, so I'm glad that, Kyra's here sharing that. I had my father, but I was very bitter even having him around because I'm like, I'm not a child. I'm not a child anymore. Um, I I just want to get back to normal. Now, Greg, you said in two breaths, you said you had nobody, and then you said you had your daughter. So when you're saying you had nobody, you're stating you had no one that you felt like you could speak to about this, or you felt completely alone in all aspects?
It was weird, Christina, because like I was telling you, we had a very secluded life. My family, my ex-wife family, we're all from New York or Jamaica, things of that nature. And me and my ex-wife, we decided to move down to Georgia and start a life out there. So we was completely isolated. We had friends, we had, church people, things of that nature. Some family moved down, but for the longest time, it was just us two, then us three, then us four. So those are the people that knew me, my two daughters and my ex-wife. Now I didn't have my ex-wife anymore. Now I'm looking at a 12-year-old and 11-year-old, and those are the only two that knew me before my stroke. Not what like you and I, you know me now, but you don't know who I was before. You don't know what I was trying to get back to. They understood that. They understood exactly who I was. And that's what I'm talking about. I couldn't speak to anybody because nobody knew what I was talking about. I had my mother, I had friends, but nobody knew from the core who I was, how I got up in the morning, what I used to do, what I used to get myself into. They didn't know that. Only they did. And it was hard to look at my daughters and trying to figure out how to communicate with them without destroying who they are as teenagers.
Now, Kyra, during this time, did you feel alone?
Well, I had my sister, because she's a year younger than me, so I had her to rely on. I wouldn't say I felt alone, more of like confused the entire time, because still I didn't understand what my dad was going through. And I was also trying to understand that he wanted to get back to normal as much as possible. But even then, I could barely help him if I wanted to, because my dad usually traveled a lot for his job. So even though I knew him like, as a father, I wasn't there to talk to him every single day like most kids are with their parents.
So, what's one thing that pops in your head automatically if I were to ask you, what's something that your dad couldn't wait to get back to and he probably should have taken a back seat and waited to do when he got home from his stroke?
Well, I feel like he should have waited a lot longer to try jumping back to being completely normal. The first thing he did when he got home after like 2 weeks was get in a car and drive. And me and my sister were
Ma'am,
like, he's not allowed to do that. So we were concerned. But yeah, something he did, yeah.
I,
where was he going?
I don't
We had
recall
no
this.
idea. He just left and we were like, where'd you go? So, because I remember one point in time, there was a time my dad was outside driving during a hailstorm and he came back with like the car roof like was busted in
That's
because the
before the
tailgate.
stroke. That's before the
It
stroke.
is. It is, but that's why we were so worried because like you didn't tell us where you were at that time, and it happens again. You leave, and you're like, Dad, where'd you go? We're worried. Don't do that.
After a stroke, mind you.
Yes. Immediately after, gets home, rests for a couple of days, and goes out. We're like, you're not allowed to drive, Dad. You can't do that.
And not being able to stop them. And then feeling almost like you're the parent.
Yeah, I don't remember that. But hey, I'll answer that. But Mr. Doja, you know, shout out to Mr. Doja. He's the one that actually made up the song for our intro. So really appreciate you. He's saying here,
Mr.
my older kids
Doja.
still ask questions about my stroke, but I haven't asked how it affected them. Thank you, Kyra, for sharing your side of things.
You're welcome.
Absolutely.
And we have another question, comment from Destiny. She said, "Hi, Kyra. Thanks for sharing. Do you still feel the need to protect your dad?"
Well, that mainly depends. If he's near me, then yes, I feel the need to keep an eye on him. But when I know he's not with me, I know he's with someone else, like my grandma or my nana or, granddad. So I'm like, they can take care of him, even though I feel like, they're too old, but they can take care of him. I feel like they can take care of him. So I don't really need to watch over him if he's not near me.
So do you think, Kyra, that your dad needs to have someone with him 24/7? He needs a caretaker?
Mm, at first I did. I slightly still do, but I feel like he's okay now in a way. But before I did feel like that because it was just, him, my sister, my mother, and me. And I was like, it's only three of us. My mom now has to start a job because, my dad's not able to work anymore. My sister and I can't help because, we're still kids. We can't have a job. So it's just me and my sister taking care of our dad, even though I'm the oldest. So I try to take responsibility for it. And my sister is still trying to have, a childhood. So I did my best to try and leave her out of it, even though she really did care for dad and wanted to help a lot.
What do you tell your little sister when she wants to help? How do you stay as the big sister, but still a child at the same time? How did you do that?
Well, I just allowed her to help because she wanted to. I never really stopped her from helping, even though I wish she would focus more on like being a kid rather than being a caretaker for her own dad. But I never try to stop her from doing it. I sometimes encourage her to help. If she wanted to because she might have known things that I didn't. 'Cause she spent a lot of time with dad, even though because I was more focused with helping mom as well because she was stressed with working because she didn't work before. So I was trying to like help basically keep the family together as much as I could.
That's what it sounds like.
So the thing that people probably don't understand about Kyra from a very young age, Kyra has that knack for taking on people's pain and trying to make them feel better and absorbs it. So I can see exactly what she's saying. I understood that. It was just very hard because I would ask her questions. I'm like, Kyra, how's your mother feeling? Like, Dad, you're asking me questions about I don't know, and I'm concerned because I know how she takes on people's energy. So I know that, her have to go back to work and taking care of everything. And Kyra's seeing this and she might not talk a lot, but she's observing it and taking it all in. So I was very concerned about that and I wanted to talk to her about that. But most of the time when I speak, it didn't make any sense. I'm going to give you a great example. I don't know if you remember this. This one time that I took you and your sister driving at your high school. And I told your sister to park the car. And instead of her stopping the car, she tried to put her car in the parking stall. And she messed up and I got mad at her. And then after a couple of hours, I realized my mistake at that. Instead of telling her to put the car in park, like the gear park, she took it as put the car in a parking stall. And I was upset that she didn't understand what I was saying. So I know a lot of times I was speaking to my children, I would say one thing and I think it was clear, but it wasn't clear. And that's probably frustrating to them. Do you remember that?
Yes, I do. Actually.
Okay. So Christina, that you know, when I look at this and I'm listening to my daughter speak right now, I can see how a lot of frustration is happening. And my major concern was that they didn't understand exactly the depth and breadth of what's going on with me. They had to deal with a lot of stuff, going through puberty, going through becoming women, going through their parents going into divorce, and on top of that, their dad having a stroke. Their life completely changed upside down. They used to be used to certain type of lifestyle. Now they don't live that lifestyle anymore. All these things are happening, not in a year, not in a week, but a day.
Just
And
that
they had
fast.
to adjust. And they had to adjust. So, it's sad that, I went through a stroke and all of this happened, but I'm looking at my daughters. I'm like, oh man, what's happened? I don't know. I don't know how to fix this. And with me as a stroke survivor, um, I overcompensated to try to make myself fit in to fix things. And I think, I don't know, you correct me if I'm wrong, Kyra. I think that put more of a wedge between us as father and daughter because I was trying too hard to try to fit into your life. Am I right? Wrong?
No, you're correct.
How did that make you feel? Like I was trying to do these things and like that, you're trying too hard or something. I don't know.
What type of things were they?
Um, I try to be an authority figure. I try to be a disciplinarian. I try to give advice, unsolicited advice. I just wanted to be a part of their lives. And I didn't realize that, just because I'm their biological father doesn't mean I can automatically just shift into the role of being a disciplinarian, especially when I don't live in the house anymore. They have to adjust to that. And then coming over to my house, I have my own rules. I'm like, now, but dad, what are you talking about? You don't really discipline us. You're not here day in and day out. So it was very difficult for me to understand that concept because these are my girls.
Kyra, what did that look like for you? What's your
It was a
version?
lot of, well, I remember when they first got the divorce and dad moved out and he got his own apartment and he was like somewhat close to us, but he was still in the state. And my mom would tell us that you can go over to his house if you wanted to. And we're like, oh, okay. And at first, my sister and I were like, yeah, it's fine. We would love to go. And we were always going like every other week. But then after a while, we were just like, this isn't exactly how we imagined it to be. I'm not sure what my sister was thinking, but for me, I was like, my dad used to be I wouldn't say carefree, but he was more, how do I say, more encouraging for us to do fun things. So when we got there, it was just less of doing fun things. It was more of like trying to, live. And we're like, we don't want to live. We want to have fun. I mean, of course we want to live, but we want to be, miss the way things were going, how it was before your stroke.
The fun dad. What type of things?
Well, it would
What
always
was he
be
doing?
a situation where, if you ask mom, she says no, go ask dad, he's gonna say yes. So, we always like go out to eat, always have fun. Um, I remember always having fun birthday parties because he was able to afford it at the time. And then when, after his stroke, all that changed. It was like my birthday party started getting dull. Even though he was there for me, it wasn't like the same anymore. It was just different. It was more like strict dad instead of fun dad.
Strict dad.
Yes.
Like he was really trying to lay down the law.
Strict dad. Oh,
Right
strict
down.
dad.
Yes, dad.
The strict. That's what Kyra. That's what we call the no fun police, honey. That's the no fun police. I have a very strict father as well. So, and he's Puerto Rican. So, you can imagine. Very strict. Um, do you think as you gotten older and now with, your father's longer in his recovery, has he become more you didn't use the word carefree. What was the word you used? Well, I guess I'll say carefree. Has he become more carefree?
uh, Well, I can't really tell because he's not here to be carefree with us. However, if I do call him, it is like nice to talk to him. My sister calls him pretty often. I was talking to him today actually, and he was seemed to be in a good mood. Seemed to be cheerful, not strict, obviously. But there are times that I do worry about telling him certain things because I'm afraid of how he reacts, if he'll overwhelm him or if he'll get angry about it. So, yeah.
Oh, that kind of rolls right into my question, Kyra. You and I are right here, a little Aries queen. With that being said, your dad, the Virgo in him, um, makes it very clear. I don't know if you watch our previous podcasts and things of that sort. Makes it very clear that he's going to say what he needs to say, how he wants to say it, and the other person's just going to have to deal with how that makes them feel. Right? He's going to say how it is. It's not his responsibility to deal with your emotions, which I do agree on. My question, with that being said, do you feel that you, since your father's stroke, have held yourself back to really saying things the way things are? Of course, there's obviously respect. He is your father, but in fear of his reaction to things. You kind of already answered that. So that was my question.
Uh, there were times when he would like us to come over because we would come over every other weekend, and I would just be, I guess you say, disappointed if I were to say no and not go with him. Because even though I did at the time, I didn't want to spend time with him. I would feel sad if he wasn't spending time with me. So each time he asked, I always be like, yeah, I don't feel like going this weekend, and he'd be like, oh, it's okay. And I'm like, no, I'm just really not. And I start feeling pity. I feel sad. I'm like, I should go, but at the same time, like I don't want to because I'm not going to do anything. And there was a time where we actually had a talk with him and my sister and me, and we were having a serious talk for a while. And it was probably the first time I was able to express how I felt about the situation towards him, and him to actually listen to what I was saying.
Hold on. We have a breaking news before we go back any further. Someone said, Greg Graham, she is your mini me. You look just like me, Kyra. Ha!
Not.
Um,
Give me a second.
But yeah, Christina, that's hard to hear what she just said, because
I was gonna get to you. I'm watching.
okay,
I'm
I'm sorry.
watching you.
Go ahead.
No. I'm watching you. I was gonna ask you what. How are you? How are you taking this? And I'm
Oh,
live. Thank you
huh?
both, by the way, doing this.
Yeah, it's hard to hear because I was I was staying at my sister's house, and then I found out I had diabetes, and my blood sugar went up to 900, and I was supposed to take out her and her sister out for my youngest daughter's birthday, and I couldn't do it. I was stuck in the hospital, so I couldn't stay at my sister's house anymore because they didn't know what was going on with me. They couldn't really take care of me, so I moved to New York. So while I was in New York, the pandemic started, and I was like, "There's no way that I could be this far away from my kids." And then the whole world shut down, and something happens, I that would destroy me. So I moved back to Atlanta, and only could afford a 1-bedroom apartment. So they basically had to stay in the living room. And I really had nothing there for them as for kids to actually play with. I had video games, but at this time I started realizing that they didn't do the same things anymore. They had two different personalities, and they like two different things. Like Kyra likes to write, um, and draw. Sometimes Shauna likes to draw too, but Shauna is more into video games, but Kyra doesn't care less about video games. So one playing video games, and the other one is like, "Can you be quiet?" And I didn't have enough room for them to do that, and I realized that became a problem. And plus I didn't have enough food for them to eat. I didn't have enough money and everything. So, she's saying all these things that I couldn't do. So that made me feel very bad that I couldn't provide those things for my children. And it was disheartening because I knew that I wanted them there. They probably wanted to be around me, but it was really nothing for them to do because Kyra herself, she likes her own space. As you can see now, she's in her room. She's in her own space. But when she's with, at my house, she's not in her space. And if they wasn't there, I was by myself. There was months on end that I had nobody visit me. And I would have to go out and see them. And I would go to her job, eat lunch, dinner at her job, so I could have a minute just to hang out with my daughter. So yeah, like I said, it's a different perspective because you're looking at two different angles. She is a child, and the stroke is forcing her to be an adult to
Yes.
take responsibilities of me, and I found that unfair. So that's when I stopped pressuring them. Like, you need to come over and see me. You need to come. No, if you don't want to come, I get it. I have to be able to be strong enough to say okay and find something else instead of just relying my whole life on my children.
Kyra, what do you think is something that your dad, he's very open about the things that he can no longer do because of the stroke. Is there anything that you think your dad, if he put more effort into it and not use his stroke as a crutch, would be able to go back to something that he did or was before the stroke?
To be honest, I can't really say much about that because majority of what he did relied on him, being able to think the way he did, move the way he did, and now you can't really do much of that stuff. So it's really hard to connect with the same activities we used to do before.
So you think that this is the new version of your dad. What you have now is what you
Yeah,
have. You're
yeah.
not going to get that other dad. Greg,
Yo,
how about you? Do you think there's anything that maybe you're kind of stopping yourself from putting extra effort? I mean, we put enough pressure on ourselves, right? With recovery. Um, Anything you feel like you could put effort into that maybe you could go back to?
um, I don't know if necessarily anything because I don't live with regrets. Things happen to happen, um, but it's more of you know all this stuff that me moving out, me starting life, and letting their mother be who she needed to be. Um, all that was taken in consideration, not necessarily with my children being in their thought process. And what I mean by that, I didn't realize how much it would affect them. My thought
Mm,
process was, we fighting every day. I don't want my children to think that this is what love is, and I'm gonna remove myself from the equation. So if their mother finds, or if I find love, they'll see what that is. But I didn't realize how much of a shattering effect it would have on them. So that's probably the only thing that, if I could make stronger, I would have done that differently. And but besides that, I don't think there's anything else that I am doing now that I could do better in my life, and I'm holding back from. I don't think that is applicable to me. It could be. I just don't know.
interesting. Kyra, it's me again. um, what is something, because you mentioned earlier that, if it were you, that you wouldn't be as open. I do feel that you doing this is so much bigger, I'm sure, than even your father and I realize. You are speaking for a lot of children who aren't able to. I know you're a young woman now, um, and being able to share that. With that being said, what is something that you could go back and tell your younger self with dealing with a parent who had a stroke? Something that would really help during this transition?
That's a difficult question. If I were to answer, I would say that I would tell myself not to stress as much as I did, because as a kid, my imagination goes wild. I'm always thinking the worst. So after hearing such news about my dad having a stroke, I'm over here thinking like, oh yeah, everything's gonna be fine, everything's gonna be okay, and then it's not. So then my whole world shatters. So if I were to tell myself anything, I would tell myself not to stress about it as much, because even though my father isn't the same, and my family's changing around me, I still have my father, and there's nothing for me to be overwhelmed at the fact that he's changing at a rapid rate.
I will tell you, if I was 11 years old, there's no way that I would have. That's deep.
It
That's
is deep.
that's Kyra. I said 11. That's deep. But remember, she was 13. That was
Yeah.
beautiful, and I do think that that was a beautiful message, Kyra. It really was, and thank you for sharing that.
Hmm.
So, Kyra, I have a question for you, and
Yes, yeah.
yeah, it's like I don't know. As a person that's going through this, and it's really opening my eyes to see what you went through, and I'm very interested to hear what your sister went through as well, because both of all three of us had our ups and downs, but there was a time that I do remember when you guys were younger. You two used to fight all the time, and then there was a situation that me and Shauna got into it, and you defended her. And I came up to you. I'm like, when you stepping into me. Why are you stepping to me? So that's my sister. I'm protecting my sister. And I do remember I was mad at you. I was very bad. But I do remember when you guys were younger, I said, you guys are fighting too much. You shouldn't have this, because when your mom and dad is not here, you guys gonna have each other. You guys got to protect each other. So when I saw that, I realized that things was happening, and even though I was taken out of the equation, I don't know where Christina went. Even though I was taken out the equation, you still was doing what your mother and your father have taught you, is protecting your sister. Um, how did your connection get stronger after my stroke, you and your sister?
Well, I'm not really sure how to say that, because I can't really express how it happened. I do remember fighting with my sister a lot, but one day, I'm not sure if it was before your stroke or after, but one day we were fighting, and after maybe like a couple minutes of fighting, we were like, this is stupid. Like, why are we fighting? And it must have clicked in both of our heads that, this is pointless. We aren't going anywhere with this. And after that, our bond just became stronger, and we stopped fighting.
Okay. So I'm looking at you, and I'm very happy to see who you are as a young woman. Christina already said that she was very happy and proud of you to actually coming on the show. This really threw me for a loop that you actually did this. This is something that I've been waiting for a very long time, that you can open up and express who you are, and also being taken part of, for me, and I don't know if that you want to do this enough, but for me, taking your rightful seat, and you and your sister taking the rightful seat and being in charge of AVM Superhero LLC, being the CEO, president, whatever. And I don't know if you understand this or not, but for me to actually be witness that you actually coming into your own, becoming a woman, it makes your dad proud. So what I'm asking you is this. Um,
Come on, Greg.
Come on, stop that. Now, since you becoming an adult, you becoming a woman, and you starting to see what you want within your life, you know, from what you have gone through in your life, and I don't want to sound selfish or naive. I don't know what the term is, but do you feel a sense of responsibility for um, taking the mantle and being that person that you claim that you are now, so your mother and your father can see the product of what they have created? Or is this just something that is a natural transition of life? Like what's going on through your head that you're actually stepping into this realm now?
Well, having when you have your stroke, I felt the need to, be more responsible and more aware of what was happening. So I feel like my mind as a kid was growing at a rate that, wasn't supposed to happen for a child. I was probably 13, probably thinking about, with the mind of like an 18-year-old. So now I'm kind of like at the mind of an 8-year-old, thinking of like the age of a 20-year-old. So I feel a lot more responsibility, even though I'm supposed to be, less responsibility for my age.
Okay. We have another question from Destiny. She's asking you, Kyra, what is one of the most fondest memories of your father, pre-stroke or post-stroke?
I was thinking about that actually. The most fondest memory I have of you was my 16th birthday party after your stroke, and you threw a party for me. It was digital because of COVID was still going on, but I do remember having a very wonderful time that day because you made a video for me to represent my life and going into sisterhood at 16 years old, and I cried because it was pretty emotional,
I
and
cried too.
but yeah, it was a very nice moment, and I think of it pretty often.
You do?
Yeah.
I can't. I can't with you guys because there's so
Christina, you saw the
cute.
video too, didn't you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Kyra, I didn't cry. I just said, "Oh, good
I'm
job,
not
Gray."
crying,
And
you're
she's so
crying.
beautiful. And then I was like, her hair. Ooh, her beautiful hair.
um, I'm gonna
It
let you
was
take this one,
beautiful,
Christina,
Greg.
because I always butcher this woman's name. I'm sorry.
Saida.
Saida. Saida asked, worst part for me was feeling helpless. Finding out that your sister had a stroke, was in a coma
Sai.
hundreds of miles away, and it happened a week prior to you finding out. Very difficult to process. Who's her sister?
I'm her sister.
I figured that.
I'm her sister. That's my soul sister. Blood makes you related, baby. That love is family.
But
Saida
hearing that,
is my
Christina,
sister.
I
I don't
know
want to talk about it.
you suck. You
This is about
suck.
you guys. Don't
Uh,
do that to me.
see.
It breaks my heart, honestly. It really
Okay,
breaks
I
my
can bring it
heart,
back
and
up.
I'm.
Thank you.
It breaks my heart. Um, I am Kyra. I'm very much like you. I'm very much an empath, so I take in people's emotions, and reading that made all my hair stick up because I know how close Saida and I are very, very close, and I could only imagine what she went through and how she processed it. And I know now. I recently went up north to New Jersey, and I got to spend a lot of time with her and my other childhood sister, Danielle, and feeling that love from them and seeing how our interaction, it's very different. It's not just a hey girl type, it's we really are taking our time and our energy in. Similar to what Kyra mentioned about, at first not wanting to go see you because there was nothing to do and things like that. And then you kind of process that, and it's like it's not that you really want anything to do. You want to be by that person. You're grateful that that person's still there. And those two ladies absolutely make me feel that. Saida, I love you. Don't do that to me. My lashes are on. I don't want them to come off.
Do it. Do it.
Kyra, hold me down.
Kai, I'm proud of the why. I think she's trying to say I'm proud of you, but she probably typed it
Thank
too
you,
fast.
Hannah.
That's your
Oh,
that's that old lady you was talking about.
she
Thank
said
you.
that
She gonna beat me up for that saying that.
she better.
Soon as I get off this live, she gonna beat me up.
One thing I can say as a stroke survivor, and just a person in general, when you have survived um, something that you absolutely should not have survived, you truly do look at life and people differently. And hearing some of these comments, Kyra, you sharing your story and hearing that, I know with us being on live, your dad probably hasn't processed everything, but I will say to the audience and for those people, um, allowing you to express yourselves to us is, for me, I'm not going to speak for Greg, for me, um, is so beautiful and it's so deep. Um, and it really brings a different light for us to really hear that you were afraid, hear that you were stressed, hear that you felt overwhelmed yourself. Um, and to be able to process that. So I would encourage, I know Mr. Doja, hey, Mr. Doja, mentioned that he hasn't really asked his kids. I would definitely encourage those who do have children to take the time out, and if they are at an age where they're able to express themselves beautifully, like Kyra did tonight, to let them speak, let them open up.
Absolutely, Christina. I agree with you wholeheartedly. Kyra, I do appreciate you coming on to the show. Um, I love you. I loved you. You probably it's kind of weird because you're the first woman that I love from birth to this day. I will always love. There's nothing that you can do that will make me stop loving you. I do need you to understand that you don't have to hold back anything from me. Anything you say or anything you do will be received. Um, what would hurt me if you lied to me? So I don't care what the situation is. Just speak. Communication is the best part of anything in life. Um, the reason why I always say, and Christina says this as well, that she says she don't mind me saying it, but this is me. I don't really when I went through my stroke, and I thought I was going to die. I didn't want to argue with anybody. I wasn't jealous of anybody. Envy was not there. None of these bad negative emotions were there. So I was saying to myself, I said, if I survive this, I'm not going to live with negative energy because when you're about to die, that's not in your thoughts. So why do you live that way? So that's why I say I don't really care about how people feel because feelings is something that you have to control. And if you are stuck in the feeling of negativity, that's on you. I can't help you on that because I don't live that way. So what I'm saying to you, Kyra, don't feel shy. Don't feel like you're gonna hurt my feelings because you really can't. The only way you can hurt my feelings is by not opening up to me. And that's why I say to anybody that's actually, listening to this and they're having conversations with their children, have that same type of conversation. Be open with them. And hopefully they can be able to respond back to you in kind. So before we leave, Kai, do you want to leave anything else for us or the audience so they can actually get some information on how to actually be a child of a stroke survivor?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, I figured you're gonna say that. That's what I love.
I
Kyra speaks through her art.
There
don't
she go. There
We
you
should have had an easel there. Kyra, do it up.
see.
Um, with Father's Day coming up, happy Father's Day to all you um, stroke survivors, for those who do celebrate. for my own father. I don't know if he watches or not. Happy Father's Day.
Ma, love you too.
Thank you for being there for me. My father was the first face I recall waking up out of my stroke. That was the first face I recall seeing. It's very vague, but I remember he was in the dark, in the corner, in a chair in the hospital room. Kyra, thank you so much again for coming on today.
Glad to be here.
I think the world of you. I think you have great energy. Who would have thought Greg was your dad? With that being said, listen, just know anytime you want to at your dad, I got you. Every time I jab at him, it's for you, honey. Greg, you had mentioned what are we going to be talking about next week?
Oh, thank you for putting me back on the spot.
Absolutely.
So what we're going to talk about next week is let your brain heal. Give it some time so you can do, and then we just leaving that out there as it could do dating. You can be able to go back to work. You can be kind to yourself instead of being so hard on yourself because you're not recovering at the pace that you thought you're supposed to be. Just give your time, give your brain time to heal so you can be whatever you need to be.
Absolutely. And guys, don't forget, of course, to follow us on our social platforms at You're Too Young to Have a Stroke on Facebook and on Instagram. It's actually Y2 HA stroke. And thank you again for everyone who tuned in. Thank you again to our special guest, Kyra. Greg, thank you for sharing your beautiful daughter with us
Yeah,
today.
no, she said she was going to do it, so I had to just let her go and do it.
I'm glad. I feel very honored that you did. Kyra's absolute pleasure, honey.
Thank you, baby girl.
Everyone, good night.
Good night, Christina. Good night, everybody. See you next week. And remember,
Buenas
like and subscribe.
noches.
Share, everybody. Talk to you
Happy
guys later.
Father's
AVM
Day.
Superhero, gone.